Hi, I'm here with Mary Robinette Kowal, and she is a science fiction author who has won many, many awards. Um, and I'm going to, my first question to her from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester. First of all, let me just say that we do have her books, and we can order any of her books. Yes, Relentless Moon. Thank you. We can order any of her books. You can call our phone number, which is 508-796-5603, or look on our website, which is www.anniesbooksworcester.com. And anyway, let me get to my first question to her, which is if you could briefly tell us a little more about yourself and your writing.
Sure. So I write science fiction and fantasy. Before that, and actually in parallel with it, I'm also an audiobook narrator and a professional puppeteer. My novels run the gamut. I write science fiction and fantasy. Series, The Glamorous Histories, is like Jane Austen with magic. The Lady Astronaut novels begin with a book called The Calculating Stars, which is the one that Annie was talking about that I won the Hugo, Nebula, Locus, and Sidewise awards, which was an exciting year, to say the least. But that is Apollo era science fiction that's women centered. I slam an asteroid into Washington, D.C. in 1952, which kicks off the space program fast and early and at a time when computers were women. So if you wanted to send a computer into space, you had to send a woman. The book that I'm touring with right now, Relentless Moon, although it's the third book, I wrote it to function as a standalone. So it takes place 11 years after the events that kick off after the meteor. And it is basically a thriller, murder mystery on the moon kind of thing. I guess less murder mystery. It's more suspense thriller on the moon.
Oh, wow, that sounds fantastic. And I have a couple of questions about where people can find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester. And by the way, my name is Selina. I'm actually not Annie's. There's no actual Annie. Patty Cryan is the owner of the bookstore. But where can people find your work aside from?
Well, I always, first of all, I always encourage people to shop at independent bookstores. It is actually better for the authors for you to buy your book from an independent bookstore, but also we like them. So please buy my books through an independent bookstore. And since you're watching this, please buy it through Annie's. Otherwise, the easiest thing to do is actually to visit my website, which is my entire very long name, maryrobinettekowal.com. And that gives you a list of a bibliography, and it also gives you ways to buy books, and tells you basically everything I've ever written. Plus other things. There's other stuff on the site too. You can join the Lady Astronaut Club.
Oh, there's a Lady Astronaut Club?
Yeah, actually,
Tell me about
it's so at the last page of the book has this thing which is it looks like an old serial ad, but it actually will work if you write to the self-addressed to the address on here. In the first book, I had referenced that there was a Lady Astronaut Club. And so for when I was on book tour, I made I don't have one in here with me. I made membership cards, and I was like, oh, but if you've got a membership card, I want there to be a thing you can do. So I set up, it's basically a Slack channel, but there's a couple of other things that you can get if you're a member of the Lady Astronaut Club. But you right away, you send in a self-addressed stamped envelope to the, since probably could not read that well, you send it to Lady Astronaut Club, P.O. Box 686 333 East Main Street, Lehi, Lehi, Utah, 84043, USA, Earth. Make sure that you know that, since there are, of course, other options. And you'll get in return a letter from Elma York, who's the main character of the first two books and the titular Lady Astronaut, and a membership card. And with that, you get access to this small private community that is the kindest place on the internet. Everyone is so supportive and just gentle and kind with each other. And so we do co-working sessions every day through another Zoom thing. So, and then they've also self-organized things. There's a crafting area that you can hang out in. There's a channel that's just called Joy. And then there's lots of stuff about space, because that is one of the things we all have in common. And a food channel as well that you can talk to people on. And then there's some bonus content. Like I will share with the Lady Astronaut Club. They all get to, they join in on beta reading. A number of the astronauts in the Relentless Moon are actually members of the Lady Astronaut Club. So it's fun. Like there's, they're the things that people do with, they'll do Tuckerizations because someone has asked for it in a fundraiser, or they'll put the name of a friend in. But then there are also things where there are Tuckerizations that no one is expecting the audience to get or see. It's like, it's not an Easter egg. It's just, this is a person that I like and they're going to go to the moon with me.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's great. So how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
You can also sign up for my newsletter there, or follow me. It also links to all of my social media stuff, so you can follow me on Twitter. Pretty much everywhere I'm at Mary Robinette, except for places where there was another one, and then I'm at Mary Robinette Kowal.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, and I think you've already kind of described what you write. So what can readers expect from the Relentless Moon?
So what readers can look for is a group of committed friends. They can look forward to danger in space, but people making intelligent decisions, and also not a lot of infighting. They can look for happily married couples who are supportive of each other's career choices, and then silly things like they can look forward to a discussion of how you would, what kind of, if you're establishing a colony on the moon and you're a spinner or a knitter, what kind of fiber are you going to be able to grow on the moon? Because cotton's not going to be an option. So Angora rabbits, pygmy goats, that is not at all the intent. That's like one passing conversation in the book. Mostly it is it's a tense, it is relentless, I have been told, suspense thriller that is set on the moon. There's you find out very early on, there's, I think in chapter 2, a rocket crashes. There are riots being spent. They're spending it on the space program. And then there's also, you find out, I think chapter 4 or so I don't feel like it's a particularly large spoiler. And I think it's also in the back matter, that there's a saboteur. And so you're dealing with this closed community and nowhere to run. And a situation where if someone wants to kill everyone, it's terrifyingly easy.
Wow. Sounds scary. One of the things that you mentioned kind of leads me into my next question. What kind of research did you do for this book?
The research process is a lot of fun, actually, because I am a giant nerd, and I get to indulge in my natural curiosity. So I got to go to NASA. I had 3 astronauts consulting on this. a
Nice.
rocket engineer, and a rocket scientist, and those are not the same jobs. A Air Force fighter pilot, an orthopedic surgeon. So basically, what I do is I get kind of a high level understanding of things.
Mhm.
And, and then I will go to one of my consultants and say, if it's something that I need to understand in more detail, and it's not the kind of it's the kind of thing where the amount of knowledge that I would have to have in order to be able to write this one scene would require me to go to university. So what I do instead is I go to someone who's already gone to university for that, and I have them talk through the scene with me. Or I will send it to them after I've written it and I've gotten the emotional arc nailed down, and then I'll have square brackets. So it'll be things like, and then the captain said jargon as he jargoned the jargon, and I'll just basically have them play Mad Libs.
Okay, and what's your favorite research story?
My favorite research story is, oh, that's hard. So probably like my favorite one would be one for the Faded Sky, but I'm gonna which is that I got to go to the neutral buoyancy lab,
Oh,
to watch a full development run, or dev run is what they call it. A dev run is a practice spacewalk in a giant pool that holds a full scale mock up of the International Space Station.
wow.
And that was an amazing, amazing day. I was so fortunate, and I got to I got to see them from getting into the suits all the way through the end. I was in the mission control room watching from there, so watching the interplay of the personalities there, which was really informative. Although I was I was there because I was interested in what was happening in the pool, but I did wind up using some of that in the Relentless Moon when I was looking at how the control room was working. Um, and then I would say the other one that I did do for Relentless Moon, and this is a great example of how
I'm sorry.
it's okay. This is welcome to the 21st century. It happens to all of us. But this is a really good example of the amount of knowledge that I needed to make an intelligent decision in a scene, being disproportionate to the amount of time that it took up in the scene, which is that in the Relentless Moon, I have someone coming from Earth to the moon, and I needed to know what day they were going to launch.
Excuse me.
No
Sorry.
problem. It's okay. So I needed to know what day they were going to launch, and that required knowing a bunch about orbital mechanics, knowing how many times I could scrub, because I needed to scrub it a couple of times for plot reasons before we lost our window. So that meant I needed to know how long the window was. It was this whole cascading thing, but really I just needed to know what day of the week it was. That was all I needed to know. But all of the stuff that went around making that decision was too much. So I called Babak Ferdowsi, who works at Jet Propulsion Laboratory and is a friend of mine. Some people may know him as Mohawk guy from the Curiosity landing. But he's also a giant space science fiction nerd, just like everybody else. And listening to him work it out, because I wasn't having them launch from Earth, so that meant that the conditions were not quite the same. And he's like, okay, so if they're launching from the ISS, that means, and we're at this orbital plane, and I'm making the assumption that it's the ISS because those are the numbers that I have at hand. And then when they land on the moon, typically you want to land at dawn. And this was like all of the Apollo missions, and this will be true when we go back with Artemis, land at dawn because there's no depth perception on the moon. There's no atmosphere to give you a clue. There's nothing close by to give you a reference like a tree. So the only thing that you've got when you're trying to gauge distance is the angle, the length of shadow. So you want to land at dawn, so that you can have this have the longest shadows possible. You get long shadows at dusk as well, but as soon as the sun dips below the horizon, it's just black. It's just it's nighttime now. So if you land at dusk, there's no time for exploration. The other thing is that during the course of the day, the surface heats up to 250 degrees. So if you land, so you basically, you want to land while the ground is still as cool as possible. So you have as much work time as possible outside, and the shadows are as long as possible. So that means under normal circumstances, you're always looking at a dawn launch. And with the ISS thing, you have the option, you have an instantaneous launch window, which means that it's go, no go. Like if you say we're going to launch at 10:51, you launch at 10:51. There's no other option. But you have multiple instantaneous launch windows because every time the ISS comes back around, you have another launch window. So you have multiple but instant launch windows. So it was like, anyway, this is the kind of thing that I get really nerdily excited about. And we had to we had to know all of those things, and listening to him work through it was so much fun and so informative. And like, I'm just parroting a bunch of stuff that he said and paraphrasing it down. But it was so much fun to listen to someone who is talking about their area of expertise and then giving them a problem that they can chew on, that's fun, that's like not a problem they would actually have to solve it for work. But so it was fun to listen to him have fun chewing on the problem. And to give me the one thing that I needed was, what day of the week did they launch?
I can see that in your eyes and your movements that you were so excited about.
I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I wish I was recording this because this is so cool.
So what was your biggest challenge in writing and putting out Relentless Moon?
The biggest challenge was that it's a parallel novel to Faded Sky. So they take place over the same time period. Faded Sky, we have a group of people, they're going to Mars. And this is the stuff that's happening on Earth while the Mars expedition is going on. And I hadn't planned on writing The Relentless Moon when I wrote Faded Sky. So retrofitting the plot into the timeline of the Faded Sky, because there are some big events that people on the moon would know and hear about, and making sure that I could have those happen at a point in the novel that made sense, while also having it not breaking anything that was going on in the Faded Sky. That was easily the biggest challenge of this. It also turned up a timeline error in the Faded Sky, which I fixed by in the Relentless Moon. There was a thing in the Faded Sky that I had happening that would have been going on for 6 weeks, and so here I'm like, it happens twice. That's why it still appears to be ongoing 6 weeks later. It's not that it was; it's that it happens twice.
Okay. Which character did you love or hate the most while you were writing?
Yes. So probably one of my favorites. So the one that I hate the most, and how are we defining hate in this context? Like as a character, like if I'm a reader, who do I hate the most? Or who do I hate the most because they were a challenge to write?
You decide.
Okay, I'll tell you the one that I hate the most as a reader. Like, oh, this person is so loathsome, and he's a character who appears deep in the novel. He's a senior engineer, and he is. I wound up calling him the hysterical Godfrey because he tries to shut down Nicole, who's my main character. She's making an argument, and he says, "Oh, come now, be hysterical," and she's like, "Hysterical?" and calls him out on using this word. And then in her, because she's being very calm and professional at that point, and then gets icily cold. But in her dialogue after that, every time, or in the narration after that, every time I talk to him, I call him the hysterical Godfrey, and I really enjoyed that because it's a thing that we've all experienced, where someone, or I should say, every woman has experienced at some point someone telling you that you're having a disproportionate emotional reaction when your reaction is completely legitimate, and basically all you're doing is not catering to, it's what you're doing is you're disagreeing with them. And so he was fun to write,
Yeah.
in a I hate him so much way. And then my favorite character is actually a pair. I love Eugene and Myrtle, and I love their marriage, and I want them. I love having the two of them on the page, and their interplay was so much fun.
So with your first one, it sounds like you loved writing him. Yeah. You loved writing a character that people hate.
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
Okay. So what drew you to the genre that you're writing in? Why do you write science fiction?
So there are two answers that I can give you. One is the answer that I give in interviews, which this is, which is that, and both of these answers are true, that I'm drawn to science fiction and fantasy for the same that I'm drawn to puppetry, which is that it allows you to take a little bit of a step back from the real world and kind of tips it to the side so that you can see the interconnective tissue. And for me, that's very exciting because it gives us a lot of opportunities to talk about things in ways that don't carry the same emotional baggage. The other reason, which is probably more true, is that I grew up reading science fiction and fantasy, and I just like rockets and dragons. Like, yep. I'm writing stuff I want to read.
That makes perfect sense. I agree. And what's your favorite part of being a writer, and of the whole writing and publishing process?
So I'm glad you clarified the writing and publishing process, because as a writer, the thing that I enjoy is having license to indulge my natural curiosity, and being paid to daydream. But there's a difference between writing and being an author. So an author is the publishing process, and actually putting your work out there in the world. And the thing that I like about that, about the publishing, is the thing that happens after I'm done with the book. You and I have a synchronous relationship with my novels, because I write it and then you won't read it until a year or sometimes 2 years later, sometimes more than that if you come to my work much later. Mm-hmm. So we're having this experience at different times. And the thing that is cool and interesting is what you bring to it. And this is actually very much like puppetry. There's a thing we say in puppetry that the difference between do you know what the difference is between a puppet show and playing with dolls?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so the answer is that we give is it's the audience. One of them has an audience and one does not. And what happens with the audience is that you have to invest in the character, and it's the same way with the reader. Like, again, it's easier for me sometimes to use puppetry as a metaphor, but if I talk about Miss Piggy and the way she bats her eyelashes at Kermit, everyone's like, oh yes, I know exactly the expression she makes, except she does not have working eyes. Like they are static things. Her eyelashes don't move at all. So that's a thing that you, the audience, have created. And when I put the words down on the page, I put down a lot of stuff, but you fill in all of that interconnective tissue. So it actually takes both of us working together in order to have this. And that means every person who is reading the book, even though, you know, there's 2,000 copies of this in hardcover, or 2,000 hardbacks, um, each of you is reading a unique book because you are writing half of the book. I'm writing half of it. You are creating the rest of it in your brain. And that is my favorite part, that thing that happens. And the fact that so many of us can have this common experience with this, but then there are other pieces of it that are specific and unique to our own experience of the book. That to me is just magical. And like it's a thing that happens to some degree in theater. But in theater, it's a synchronous experience. We are all having it at the same time. And the fact that we can have this happen across a globe, across time, like I'm having, every time I pick up a Jane Austen novel, I have an asynchronous experience with Jane Austen, which is really a cool thing when you stop and actually think about it. So that would be my favorite thing about publishing and putting my work out in the world.
Do you ever talk with some of your readers about their experiences with your book?
Yeah. So I have beta readers who read along with me as I go, which is the closest to a synchronous experience I can get. But I also, I get, people will write to me in the before times when I would do conventions, or people would talk to me at coffee clutches or after a panel or something. And that, with these books, that has been, there's not a good single word for it. It's been gratifying and humbling and moving, because the piece that keeps happening with Calculating Stars in particular, is my main character has a social anxiety disorder, and in the book she finally goes to get help for it, and gets and goes on medication, and you know, so is doing therapy and medication, and it parallels my own journey with depression, which I didn't acknowledge and get diagnosed for until I was 45, and I'm 51 now for reference. So I get people who write to me and say variations on, thank you for giving me a script to go to the doctor, or this book may have saved my life because it made me go talk to someone and I would not have otherwise. And the ones that are really heartbreaking, one in particular, she tweeted at me and she said, this thing that happens when Elma is having trouble breathing and throws up and is sweating. She's like, this has happened to me my entire life. Does it have a name? Like, I didn't know that this was a thing that happened to other people. And I'm like, yes, that's called a panic attack. Elma has something that's called social anxiety disorder. There's treatment for it. And I really encourage you to go see someone. And on the one hand, she was like, I made, you know, the thing that she brought to this book, which was her own experience, and she saw herself in it, caused her to go get help. And that's wonderful. And it's also incredibly heartbreaking that she's a fully functioning adult and has lived her entire life with this thing that's incredibly unpleasant and difficult. And no one told her that it wasn't the way she needed to live, because we don't talk about mental health. And we're expected to just suck it up. And, you know, and that medication is something that you should be ashamed of. And it's like, none of that is true. And the fact that she had been living with this burden unnecessarily is really upsetting. And at the same time, like, I'm so glad I wrote this book.
that is fabulous that you did.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So next question is, what kind of advice would you give to other writers?
So I'm gonna say this really specifically. Like there's a bunch of advice that I give to writers that that I is in other interviews about, write what you enjoy writing. But I'm going to talk to people who are listening to this right now, which is in the middle of pandemic. It is okay to not write. Like, you love it, absolutely. But if you are having trouble writing and you're not making any progress and you're miserable, it's not you. Like, the world is on fire. There's a pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty and strife. We just had a horrible, horrible, tragic, at the moment that you're listening to this, just a couple of days ago. This is me recognizing that you may listen to this later, but just a couple of days ago, horrible tragedy in Beirut with the terrifying, huge explosion. It's okay to not write. It'll be there when you are solid, when you're steady. And it's also okay to write just a little bit. It's okay to take the big project that you've always wanted to do and to start working on it as a soporific to hide from the main world. But if your narrative cycles are being chewed up by everything else that is going on, that's okay. It's not a permanent state. We talk about the before times, but there's an after as well. We're in a threshold, we're in a cusp period right now. It's okay to wait it out. It does not mean that you're not a writer. It doesn't mean that it's just taking time to do self-care and not beating yourself up. That's what I would probably say. It's like, don't beat yourself up if you aren't writing.
I think that's absolutely fantastic advice. I mean, creativity right now is very, very difficult. I've been finding that myself. You know, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Fantastic advice. Now, how important has the New England area been to your writing? Do you have any connections to New England?
No, embarrassingly. No, I have spent very little time in New England. I did, so most of my connection to New England is actually from my puppetry side, because I would come up for puppet festivals or to visit friends, or when I was on tour back when I used to do that. So the first time that I walked on, so I grew up in the American South, and was visiting friends in, New Hampshire. I was like, wait.
England, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wait. Which tiny little state were they in? And we went for a walk, and there was a creek that was frozen and you could walk on it. And this was mind-blowingly magic to me. I had read about this in books, but I thought that, like, that's water can't freeze that solid. That's like ridiculous. And so that was really, really cool. But unfortunately, I don't get up there as often as I would like to. It's a beautiful landscape.
Well, if you do ever get to New England, you're certainly invited to come to visit us.
Thank you. I would love that.
Okay. Is there any question that you wish interviewers would like to ask you and they haven't?
I should just come up with a list of things that I wish people would ask me, because people ask this question and I'm always like, I don't know. Let's see. What do I wish people would ask me? Oh, I know one. Let's just, since we're just talking about puppetry, ask me about the new Muppet Show.
Okay. What I'm asking you about what about the new Muppet Show?
So I am so excited to have the Muppets on. I love the Muppets a lot. Grew up with them. Um, there's a new character, Joe from Legal, who is being performed by a very dear friend of mine. I'm so excited that he's getting work. And why did they introduce another male character on the show? The new Muppet Show has one female puppeteer listed.
Uh,
One. But there's multiple female characters who are played by men. And when we are talking in science fiction and fantasy about representation and how a spot can be taken up by a white author writing a character that is a is a person of color, this is what we're talking about. This is a very solid metaphor made manifest of exactly what we're talking about, because you don't need another strong, you don't need another woman lead on the Muppet Show, because you've got Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy has been played by a man for her entire existence. And I know that there are women who are trained to do this, because I participated in the Jim Henson Diversity Initiative, in which they brought in a bunch of women and people of color because they were aware of the problem. And so the casting notice did not actually say anyone is welcome to sign up except white guys, but it may as well have. So I know that they trained 18 people. Of those 18 people, the only 2 people that I am aware of that have been cast are men. And I'm so happy for them. But when we're trying to make changes and systemic changes, the people at the top have to actually make the change. Just saying, oh, we're going to do this measure to get more voices in, and then not actually making space for the voices to go, doesn't actually fix the problem.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. So what can we expect to see from you in the near future?
So the depends on how we're defining near. The book that I'm working on right now is called The Spare Man. It'll be out in 2021, which is next summer. It's a locked room murder mystery on an interplanetary cruise ship with a happily married couple and their small dog Gimlet. And if you think, this sounds awfully like The Thin Man, you are correct. It is just like The Thin Man in space. It's certainly a very strong homage to the Thin Man films, which I love those films a lot. But yeah, locked room murder mystery on an interplanetary cruise ship and a small dog who does not die.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Speaking of animals, I do have one question. A lot of writers do have little furry critters or whatever that are with you. Do you have any pets that sit with you when you write?
Yes, or rather, I have a pet who's with me when I am not writing, because she is with me. No, I have 2 cats, Sadie and Elsie. They are delightful. The door to this room is currently shut, because normally I let them come in when I'm doing this, because let's face it, people enjoy having the appearance of the pets. But last night when I was doing an event, Elsie came in, and I was in front of a green screen last night instead of, this is my actual wall. And she pulled the green screen over. So, and that was a live event. This is recorded. I thought about it, but I was like, you know what? I don't actually need that. When we were doing the Nebula Awards, which were live, I was introducing a thing, and that room did not have a door that latched, and so she's in and out, and I'm reading the name of a finalist, and while she's chewing on my feet, like literally, like, hi, all fine, and then she also, in that particular thing, again, I'm saying, and the next finalist is, and across from me, she has hopped up onto a table where my husband has put a sandwich for me to eat during breaks and is grabbing the sandwich. And I can't stop because it's live and it's an award show. So I have to keep going, but I'm watching this cat who has a food allergy on top of everything else. So is not only is she not supposed to be eating my sandwich, she's not supposed to be anything except sanctioned food. See her grab the sandwich, take it down to the floor, and she's like, so as soon as my camera is off and they've gone to another segment, I've like lunge past all of the gear that I have, grab the sandwich, and I have like, a minute. I'm like, I can't run it out of the room. And so I just opened a drawer and shoved it in the drawer. And I was like, hello, welcome back. We're so happy you were able to join us as I proceed to pronounce all of your names correctly because I'm a professional.
That's great. My cat usually sits on top of my computer.
Yes.
I locked her out.
If you follow me on Twitter, you will periodically get messages from our feline overlord, which is Elsie, because she will walk across the keyboard.
Makes sense. Okay, so what are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time for your non-writing, hobbies or things?
I in the before times I enjoyed travel. Reading. I really enjoy reading. I read and I cook. I spend time with my husband. Like we enjoy, long walks on the beach. I joke, but the thing for me that I enjoy is connection with other people. I also enjoy things, craftsmanship kind of activities. So crocheting. I used to, when I was doing the Regency novels, I hand sewed a bunch of Regency gowns. So those are things that I enjoy. As for how I find time, it is very difficult. One of the things, and this is something that I would suggest to any writers out there who are thinking about going into this or who are already into it and like, oh no, what have I done? Figure out how many days a week, how much time a week you want to actually work. And recognize that as a writer, your work is not just the writing, but also managing a bunch of other things. Even when I'm not on book tour, I have to have a certain amount of engagement in order to stay present and be involved and build that community. So that means answering interviews, engaging in social media, so that when I do need to promote something, it's not just, hello, my social media exists just to say, buy my book. But what I've done is I've broken my calendar down into blocks that represent the activities that I know that I want to be doing and the activities that I want to do, kind of by type. So like I mentioned, I enjoy sharing. I said connection, but I enjoy sharing, whether that's sharing food or sharing a conversation. So I have a block on my calendar that says sharing. And then when I am going to put something on a new thing on the calendar, if it keeps me from scheduling it in that time slot, or rather it forces me to make time for sharing. It forces me to make time for the other things. And then I'm really religious about trying to give myself time off. So knowing that on book tour, I had a bunch of evening events, I took times out of my bank during my work business hours, put them in the evening, but then filled them instead in the 9 to 5 slot where they would normally live, with a block that says off time, do not schedule. And I'm like, okay, so now I read, now I do some crochet, now I do now I shop for a sofa, which I want to do but don't have time to do, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're writing?
My writing space varies. Because I started writing when I was on tour with puppet theater, I could not have a reliable space. So I have a desk that faces a window. I find that I like to be able to see outside. Um, when I'm working, it's not 100% necessary, but I prefer it, especially if I'm going to do a lot of it. I just got a quirky writer keyboard, which is it looks like a typewriter, but normally I'm just writing. I have a Microsoft Surface, which is what we were talking on, and
Mm-hmm.
until 2 weeks ago, that was the keyboard that I used. Actually, it may only be a week ago. So I'm just very. I have trained myself to be able to write wherever I am without requiring things. I think the only thing that like I take a set of noise canceling earbuds with me when I am uh like again in the before times when I would be writing on airplanes or coffee shops or something, and I have them here too, because if there is a discernible conversation, I will try to pay attention to that instead of what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
So the noise canceling earbuds and a soundtrack are and something to write on are pretty much the only things that I need.
Okay. Um, what's the one thing that most people don't realize about you?
Um, the one thing that most people don't realize about me, well, like I think if I didn't tell people that I have depression, they wouldn't know, because I'm a very cheerful, depressed person. But I talk about it enough that I feel like people know at this point. Um, do people know I was a puppeteer? Uh, I'm pretty open about my speech impediment. Um, I had a speech impediment when I was a kid, and it's still somewhat present. Um, it's for the most part, it's like it's pretty mild, um, but I still will sometimes have trouble with the letter R. It's something I had to learn to say it. I can't roll my R, which is a challenge when I'm doing audiobooks with Portuguese in them. And who is this author that keeps writing Portuguese into her novels that she knows she's going to then have to narrate? Um, so, uh, and it's not a big deal, but it will. I have a disproportionate reaction when I'm like going through a drive-through or talking on the phone and someone can't understand me. All of the childhood distress of that is still in an undercurrent underneath. Um, and I'm not. I remember going to the speech therapist, and but I don't consciously remember the anger and frustration at people not understanding me. But when it's hard, it makes me disproportionately upset.
Do you do your own audiobooks?
I do, yeah.
You
So yeah, because and they let me do them because I already have a track record of narrating. Um, and the first novel I still had to audition for my own work.
really?
Yeah,
And you enjoy doing them?
I do. I really enjoy it. And actually, for this book, you can see the tour my publisher for the print books and in the U.S. and Audible, my
Mm-hmm.
audiobook publisher. Both of them agreed to let me live stream the narration process for this. So day one and day two are still up on YouTube. We pulled the rest of it down because but you can see what 2 days of recording look like. It took
Oh,
9 days to record the books.
oh, fantastic. So, what's been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
My favorite adventure during my writing career. I already told you about the
Yeah.
NBL. It fin- oh, I don't know if you count this as an adventure. Um, the Oregon Regency Society. So I was living in Portland, Oregon when I was writing the Regency books, and bought a dress, the little white Regency gown. They were going to have a ball and tea, and I went and fell in love with the community and the people, And so while I was living in Oregon, I would go to every event. But my favorite thing was they would do retreats, and um, and it would be all Regency all the time. There was a room that had sewing machines and the BBC Pride and Prejudice playing 24/7. But other than that, that was the only room that we turned the lights on. Everything else was all candles. Um, and you dress, you have your morning dress, you have your evening dress. But one of the ones that we did was in Astoria, Oregon, and the tall ships had come in. And so we all went out in full Regency gear to get on the tall ships, and we went sailing on the tall ships, and the sailors who, they're real sailors, um, but they're all issued period garb at the beginning of the season, which they are supposed to wear anytime passengers are aboard. So by the time we see them, they've stopped being costumes and they're very much clothes, and they've been mended and patched and are stained and torn, and none of them know how to really sew because they're modern sailors, unlike the period sailors who would absolutely have known how to do good hand stitching. So I helped, like I mended some things, someone else mended something while we were on board, but I said, because they had cast-offs and second-hands from previous crews that were just still on the ship, and I'm like, if I come back tomorrow, I can bring my sewing kit and I can actually do a proper repair on some of these. And so the next day they let me come back, and they were doing a battle cruise. So it was the two ships going back and forth and firing their cannons at each other. I mean, with just gunpowder, but still. So I'm sitting on the deck of this, battleship, dressed in full Regency gear, with people in full Regency sailor garb running around, and mending, like have just tucked myself into a corner where I'm out of all of the traffic paths, and I'm just mending a shirt and a pair of trousers, and the amount of time, and it's like, what you realize is how slow these battles are, because you sail past the other ship and you can fire while you're going past them. And then you both have to turn around and then come back to make another pass. So there's this really narrow window of time when it's not safe. And the rest of the time, it's like, oops, see, now my phone has made a noise. The rest of the time, it's fine. So it was so much fun. And it happened because I had originally gone to this to learn more about writing, in the period. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is exactly what an officer's wife would have been doing during one of these. She would have tucked away someplace that was safe and out of the way of the crew, but she would have just kept doing her mending work, because you just carry on.
Wow, that sounds so fascinating.
It was so cool.
Wow. It's like, wow, it's almost, it sounds so surreal, it really does.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you're writing? Do you prefer music, silence, or anything else?
It's
what
a
do you
mix.
prefer?
I generally, usually I say silence, but if I'm having trouble focusing, or if there's a noise going on around me, I will sometimes turn on music. When I travel, I definitely have music that I play. I have a writing soundtrack that's saved on Pandora. And then there's a website called brain.fm that uses binaural sound to help you focus. And I've found that I'm angry that it works, but it works.
Okay. Do you have any favorite foods or drinks that you must have while you're writing?
No, not while I'm writing, actually. I find that if I am anything that I have a rule not to eat or drink at the computer. I have water there, but if you're eating or drinking at the computer, you're not writing. Your hands are off the keyboard.
Ah, interesting. A lot of people like to have coffee. They say, I can't write without coffee.
Yeah. No, I keep a glass of water there because I can't, then if I don't have it there, then I will use the I'm thirsty as an excuse to get up.
Makes sense. Yeah. Now, what is the greatest lesson that you have learned in your writing career?
To trust my own taste as a reader. Um, you know, you've spent your entire from the moment that you learn to read till now, you have spent that time cultivating your taste as a reader. You know what you like, you know what you don't like. And when I started writing, I kept trying to write to someone else's taste,
Mm.
and learning to trust my own taste. That has been the best thing that I have learned.
Okay, great. And I have one last question. Are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you would recommend to other people that are interested in writing?
So actually, yes. If the I'm a member, I'm the president of Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America, and this year we made a change to the way the way the Nebula Conference is. Normally, the Nebula Conference is one weekend, and it's open to anyone who wants to come. You don't have to be a member of SIFWA. You don't have to have sold anything. You don't even have to have completed anything or started anything. You can come, but if you are, it's geared for people who are pursuing writing seriously. You know, whether you're pursuing it as a serious hobby, or you're pursuing it as something that you want to be a career. It's geared, and I should say actually, the Nebula is specifically geared for people who want to pursue writing professionally, which for us means in the stream of commerce. Like you are writing because you're pursuing publishing because you'd like someone to give you money. But you also are writing because you love writing, you love the craft of it. So we have this conference. Because of the pandemic, it was in May, so we were very early. We pivoted to being online, but we also decided to run it year round. So you can join the Nebula Conference. It's $100. It gets you access to all of the panels that we had that initial weekend. It also unlocks writing dates. Kate Elliott is about to begin teaching a series on world building. We have a reading series that happens as well. So it is an opportunity to, and there's a community of writers that that is associated with it. So it's an opportunity to connect, that's ongoing and year round, and that doesn't require you to have already jumped through a hurdle to get in.
Great. Wow, thank you very much. This has been really wonderful. So I want to thank you so much for all of your answers to our questions, and I really appreciate all that you're doing in the field. It's just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So, and again, we at Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, we have all of your books.
Yes.
And you can, and for anybody who's listening, you can buy Mary Robinette's books at Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and look at our website at Annie's Bookstop. Excuse me. AnniesBooksWorcester.com, or call our phone number at 508 excuse me, 796-5603. 796-56. Actually, sorry, I am. Yeah, it's been a long day. Yeah, that was not the phone number. But look at our website at AnniesBooksWorcester.com.
And the other thing, just for folks listening, is that I normally give out swag when I'm touring in person. So if you order a copy of The Relentless Moon from Annie's, the first 17 people who do that get a mission patch, and this is the mission patch that you get. So this is what my main character, Nicole Wargan, would have worn when she was on one of her missions.
Yes. And we will have those patches for the first, I think, believe it's 17 people who buy the books from Annie's. Okay. Great. So thanks again, and we will be speaking with you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.